So this is intro. We're on Yud Amid Aleph, the Mishnah right there on the top. And so you know that there are mitzvahs, the Torah Shebiksav, and then of course there's the Torah Shel Baal Peh. The Torah Shel Baal Peh fills in the details, the machloikis, to work it out. What does it mean? So for an example, honor your father and your mother. And your mother and your father, you should fear. But how do you honor and how do you fear? That's just a simple example. You shall watch the Shabbos. But what are the rules of the Shabbos? The truth is, from the written Torah, you only get the broad classification. It required the oral Torah to fill in the details, and that's which we're still arguing about to this day. Comes this Mishnah and says that there are some things that literally, it has very thin reach from the Torah, and we filled it in. And this is what it's interesting here. The rules about being matir neder, of disavowing a vow. The truth is that we know that we're allowed to go in front of a Chacham Gadol or 3 witnesses, especially before Rosh Hashanah, and we go ahead and we're matir neder. The truth of the matter is those laws are parchis ba'avir, are floating in the air. And there's really no spiritual support. Hilchas Shabbos, the laws of Shabbos, Chagigah, which is now the reason for this Mishnah, and the idea of bringing Chagigah, and being over on Me'ilah when you use something that has been sanctified for the Beis Hamikdash, when it is used inappropriately for mundane purposes. Are like mountains that are suspended by a hair, that have few psukim but have many laws. Hadinim, monetary law, v'havoidis, and sacrificial law, hatahoris v'atameis, purity and contamination law, v'arayis, illicit relations. Yesh lahem amash samchu, there really is spiritual support. V'hein heim gufei Torah, and these in fact are the fundamentals of the Torah. What does any of this mean? We're about to get started. Give me 1 second. Just got to get a tissue. Okay. So Zok the Gemara. Tanya, we learn. Rabbi Eliezer says we're now on 10A2. 10A2. Yesh lahem al mashi samchu. There are laws of aforas nidorim, being made for nidorim. What are you talking about? From our Mishnah, it seems to say that it doesn't really have any spiritual support. In fact, it most certainly does. Shenema, because it says yafli ki yafli shtei pamim. Twice it says with regarding to this. One, it says as follows. With regard to an erechin, where a person is vowing his value, right? It says ki yafli, you shall clearly honor. And with regard to when Nazirus, it's the same idea where you have to say he shall be utterly clear when he wants to vow to become a Nazir. Achas haflo le'isub, achas haflo leheter. Says one clear utterance to forbid, that's le'isur, and one clear utterance to permit. This is, by the way, where the name of the sefer became the hafla, or pella. Hafla is that it's clear. It's a clear utterance. So Rabbi Eliezer learns it out from that says, in fact, we do have a clear biblical support from the Gezeirah Shava between Yafli and Ki Yafli. Rabbi Yeshua Omer, Yesh Lehem Al Mashi Samcha. I've got another place where Het Nidorim, Mati Nidorim can hang it with a spiritual support. Shenema, Asher nishpati biapi. Therefore, I have sworn in my wrath that they shall not come to my resting place. Ba'api nishpati b'chasibi. Because I have sworn in my wrath, therefore I can retract. Because when one is angry, one just acts out of impulse, not with true intent. Rabbi Yitzchak Omer, yesh lahem amashi yisavchu shenema kol nidiv liboy. We had this in Parshas Truma. All who has a willing heart brought. You see, it requires a willing heart. If your heart wasn't willing, you could retract. Chananya ben Achi Rabbi Yeshua, Omer. Chananya, the nephew of Rabbi Yeshua, said, yesh lahem amasamchu shenema nishpati v'akayemo lishma mishpatei tzidkecha. I have sworn, and then the next words, I will fulfill to keep your righteous ordinance. What do I do? We're holding right away to be happy birthday, Daddy.
Oh.
Happy birthday. Happy birthday.
Thank you, everybody.
Happy birthday.
Very good.
Thank you, Jim.
Hello.
You got my message.
Hello. Maya Ke'esri. Maya Ke'esri.
Very good. Thank you.
Very good.
You.
We're holding on Daf Yud Amid Aleph. We're up to Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel. We're going through the Mishnah just said that Hafaras Nedorim.
Where is it on the bottom? Or
Yud in the middle. In the middle.
Okay.
In the middle, we're up. Look at right above Tosfos, right by Tosfos, La Fuke Midishmuel.
Okay,
right?
I got it.
So
just
again,
one thing. Just say that the learning is the refuah shleima for
Naftali ben Chana.
Naftali
ben Chana. My nephew, my cousin, my father's nephew, unfortunately had a skiing accident last week. We don't know the situation exactly, but he needs a refuah shleima.
Okay.
Okay, so the learning should be for refuah shleima for Naftali ben Chana. Shnema nishpati ba'keyema lishma mishpatei tzidkecha. So now, so therefore, we seem to have plenty of places where aforas nedorim, being made for neder, right? Being made for neder is in fact got many spiritual illusions. Now, Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel, Ihave Hosam Aminulay. If I had been there, I would have said, Didi Adifa Midichayu. My source is better than yours. Shenema, it says straight up. Lo yachal devaroi, he shall not profane his vow. Who ain't a Michael? It means he can't go ahead and profane it. But others could profane it. This, in fact, was this Shabbos is Parsha. Parsha's Kisisa by Yechal Moshe's Bnei Hashem Aleikov. Says the Medrash Rabbah, amazingly, that Moshe Rabbeinu told Hashem, forgive Klal Yisrael. Hashem said, I'm so sorry, I swore to destroy them. So Moshe Rabbeinu said to him, you gave us in our Torah that when one swears in their anger, it could be reversed.
Right.
You can't, Vayichal, you can't. You can't.
But I can.
But I can go ahead and be Ma'achayu. Miyad. The Rabbeinu says the Rabbeinu Shloim stood. This is the Medrash. I couldn't say it if it wasn't the Medrash. The Hashem stood, and Miyad, Moshe wrapped himself in a talus, sat, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu stood. And then Rabbi Yochanan says, if it didn't say, I couldn't say this.
Right.
The Rabbeinu Shalom told Moshe, To'isa, I made a mistake. My words were a mistake. And Moshe said, Mutalach, 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 lo neder, lo shuvah, lo chayrim, lo kinum. And I think by Echal Moshe, right? These exact words. It pays to see it. And in fact, you now have an idea of what do we do by Kol Nidre. What do we do by Kol Nidre? I saw this book from Rav Sachs Zechenu Levracha. It now gives us an idea, why do we wear a talis Yom Kippur by night? Because Moshe wrapped himself in a talis when he went to be made for Neder to the Rebbeinu Shalom.
Very good.
And then we do it over there. So anyways, let's keep going.
Very good.
Beautiful Medrash Rabbah. It's Kedai, Daddy, I think you saw it this week, right? If you looked in the Medrash on Parshas Kisisa, you will see it over there. I think it's 43, Perek 43, Dalet, Sif Dalet. Go take a look. You have it I think you have the Medrash. I have the Medrash Rabbah by me. Remind me to show it to you. I have it. I have a copy of it. Very good. Amar Rava. L'kula islay pircha, for everybody. There is a flaw in their arguments about saying that those psukim have to do the paras nedarim, but levar mishmuel less like pircha. This layachal devarai is perfect. The Rabbi Eliezer, who learned it out from Yafli and Ki Yafli, I could have answered Dilma Kid Rabbi Yehuda. Mishum Rav Tarfon. Titania. If a person sees a person coming, he says, if the person says, I'll be a Nazir, if the man approaching is a Nazir, and his fellow says, I'm a Nazir if he's not a Nazir. So it would seem that one of them is going to become a Nazir. Rabbi Yehuda and Mishum Rav Tarfon, no, La'ilam ein echad mehem Nazir, none of them are a Nazir. Shalai nitna Naziras elolav flaw. Because by Naziris, it has to work only by a clear utterance where there is no doubt at the moment that you said it. So maybe you wanted Tanai, conditional, it does not create a Naziris. Even Rabbi Yeshua, who said the words, Asher nishpati biyapi, that I did it in my wrath. So in a wrath, I can reverse it. Dilma hachi kama. Ba'api nishpati beloyer data be. I have sworn in my wrath and I will not retract. Right? And I did not retract. We're now on 10:8:3. Imi Rabbi Yitzchak, who said from Kol Nidid Levi, maybe it's coming to exclude the case of Shmuel. The Amar Shmuel, Goma Beliva, if one made up in his mind to swear or make a vow. It's not enough. What's going on is his intent. He actually has to
verbalize it. Yeah.
This comes to teach us that if somebody makes a vow to donate to the Beis Hamikdash with his lips, right? Even if he did not utter it with his lips, he just had intent in his heart, the resolve is binding. This rule now applies, in fact, period. If a person in his mind makes up in his mind he's going to donate X amount of dollars, he has to keep his resolve. The flip side of that is on business. If somebody's doing business and he's in the middle of Shema, and somebody comes over to him to do this for X, Y, and Z, and in his mind he makes up a price, but because he can't speak out, the other person keeps raising the price. The fact of the matter is, you have to go back to the original price. That does have real world ramifications. The example will be this: if somebody wanted to sell, let's say, an apartment in Eretz Yisrael,
right,
and that for whatever reason the paperwork is not in place, and they make up a price. And now it's 3-4 months later and the prices have increased. He's not allowed to go back to the guy and say, I want you to pay the increased price. Even though it was only verbal and none of it was written and there's no contract. But once you blame das, you resolve in your mind, you cannot simply that reservation. So now, even the Chanina Barachi Rabbi Yeshua, even the Hanania, the nephew of Rabbi Yeshua, who said, Nishpati v'akayema, I am sworn that I will fulfill. That's how they want to use the extra words, I fulfill your righteous ordinance. Dilma Kedrav Kedil Amarav. The Amarav Gidul Amarav, Minaim Shenishpatim the Kaimes Mitzvah. Imagine, how do we know that it's good to vow to fulfill a mitzvah? It means, of course, we have to keep mitzvahs, but in order to encourage yourself to do the mitzvah, You lay on top of it, you make a vow that I'm going to do the mitzvah. Shnema nishmati v'akayem alishma mishmata yitzivkecha. El Shmuel leslei pircha, but Shmuel lo yachel devara, he has no flaw. This is why people say charifta, one sharp pepper, one jalapeno is better than a basket full of melons. In other words, Shmuel was the last one in. Rabbi Yehuda is Shmuel, and he's the one that got the Yachel Devore.
No, it means Shmuel was only an Amoira,
and he's
better than the Tanoim.
Right. Now, it should be noted, Shmuel is an Amoira, but his counterpart, Rav, is the last Tana.
It was in between.
So,
right.
Shmuel happened to have been, Rav was the direct Talmud of Rabbi HaKadosh, Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, the one, the redactor of the Mishnah. Shmuel didn't actually learn from Rebbe, but he was Rebbe's doctor. He was
right.
Rebbe's doctor. He learned from the great Talmidim of Rebbe. He learned from Levi and the Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Hanania HaGadol, right? So, anyways, Bekitza, Shmuel is always the very interesting. Shmuel, by the way, is not called Rav Shmuel because Shmuel never actually got smicha.
Smicha, right.
But nonetheless, he's the Rav.
He was the Rosh Yeshiva of his.
Not only was he the Rosh Yeshiva, he was the Rosh Yeshiva in the biggest city in the Jewish city, Nadoi and Pumpadisa, essentially.
Yeah.
It was Nadoi because they didn't move yet to Pumpadisa, but that was the case.
Yeah.
Right. Anyways, Hilchas Shabbos. Now this is this week's parsha. Parshas Vayakel. Parshas Vayakel. It talks about Shabbos, and then it goes to talk about in detail, and I underline the word detail, the Meleches HaMishkan. And that's how we learn that the 39 Meleches HaMishkan apply to who? To Shabbos, because the Torah juxtapositions Shabbos right next to the details of the Meleches HaMishkan. So
in the Mishkan, you have to have machshava.
Right, so I'm saying, but let's see what it says here. Hilchas Shabbos, we said, is suspended by, it's like mountains suspended by a hair. So practically, what are you talking about? Michtav Michtovin. It's written plenty about the Yitzhak Shabbos all over the place. It's not suspended by a hair. We need it only in the case of similar to Rav Abba. If one digs holes in the floor of his house before the courtyard on Shabbos, but not because he needs the hole, because he needs the dirt to cover over dirty stuff, potter aleha. He's potter from having made holes. Why? Because it's a malaka she'ena machsheves. Right? Says the Gemara, Keman. Kidi Rav Shimon. Da'ama malacha she'ena tzaricha legufa potter aleha. That if you do an act that's a forbidden act that is not needed for its defined purpose, it's not liable for it. On Shabbos, it's only liable for something that has, what do you call it? That you're liable. Now, the one who
mutter doesn't mean mutter. It means mutter avaloso.
Avaloso, midrabanan l'chalapachas. Here, afilu teimel Rabbi Yehuda. The truth is, you could even say, according to Rabbi Yehuda, who's the makbid. Rabbi Yehuda is the one who holds a muksa, who says even Einat Tzricha Legufa is osir. Hasam, where Rabbi Yehuda says it's osir to perform the labor, Einat Tzricha Legufa, that you don't need for its defined persons, is where it is rectifying something. At the end of the day, you're building something up. Hacha, in the case of making holes that you don't need, that your wife is going to drive you crazy about making divots in the middle. Anybody on a golf course knows this. You can't make divots. So imagine making divots in the middle of the dining room. You make divots in the middle of the dining, not because you need the divots, because you need the dirt. Here it is to ruin the house. And since ruining the house is therefore, it's definitely not an act of building. Even Rabbi Yehuda would say, it's perfectly fine. So pray to Gemara, at the end of the day, you haven't answered my question on 10a4. What does the Mishnah mean, like a mountain suspended by a hair, that there's no spiritual illusions, right? When in fact, there most certainly is. Says the Gemara, now we're on Amid Beis, Yud Amid Beis. Maleches machsheves also Torah. It's in regard to a malacha that the Torah only asked a calculated labor. Maleches machsheves like siva. And the condition of calculated labor is not expressly written in the Torah with regard to Shabbos. Okay? Okay, Rachel, enjoy the bris. Malachas machshavas. Take a look at the top Rashi. Shamachshava choshva b'datoi u'v'nischaben l'zeh b'zeh loy nischaben l'binyan zeh. His intent is not for the building. His intent was not to make holes, was to.
Yeah.
Therefore, he's off. That's what he calls. He's off the hook. You're only usher on a malachas machshavas. The problem with this whole thing here is that, in fact, none of the Lamed Tes malachas, are mentioned in the Torah. All 39 labors of Shabbos that you're not allowed to do are derived from this week's parsha. That the parsha of Shabbos is Shomru B'nai Yisrael, essentially, is juxtaposition with the Mishkan. So, perfect. That's what we can say. There's no spiritual illusion to the Isurim. We have to derive it. That would have been the simple answer. What is this whole conversation over here on Malachas and Tzricha Gufa, Malachas Machsheves? Say simple. I don't even know what the Yisurim are unless you go ahead and have to derive it from the Mishkan.
But the Mishkan, it says clearly what
Right.
the Mishkan is. So therefore,
how do you know it applies to Shabbos?
Because it's next to each other.
Oh, who told you that?
What?
Who told you that?
Well, that's one of the 13
Okay, boom.
way of learning the Torah.
Who taught the 13 things? Rabbi
Shmuel.
Shmuel. So, bada bing. That's it. That's not the spiritual. It's not you have to learn it out. But I have another answer. What are we asking the whole time over here? Kaharorin atuluyim bisharo, like a mountain surmounted by a hair. In learning, there are two types of people. There are Sinais, and then there are Oikahorim. The Sinais are people who know things bikiyas, broadly. They have a great broad picture of the Torah. Oikahorim are those who destroy mountains, overturn mountains. Those are Pipulei HaTorah. For an example, like the Tana Debei Rabbi Yishmael. The Gemara here is saying, Sinais. The question is Sinais. Are the Sinai, is it alluded to or not alluded to? Oikaharim, we're dealing over here with the Hadrin Teluyim Bisara, mountains suspended by a hair. Wow. This limud that the parsha of Shabbos is right next to the parsha of the Mishkan. That's Harim. That's Oikaharim. That already from the Sinai, from reading the Torah, you're not going to get that. Just because this is here in one parak, it should link to the next bunch of parakim. Doesn't work that way. It's the Oikaharim of the Torah of Rabbi Yishmael, who gave us the 13 ways of learning the Torah. Kahadrin atuluyim bishara. I think that's pshat. That's the way I want to say it.
Not quite. You know why?
Why?
Because everywhere when two things are next to each other, it's
Yeah,
called a hekesh.
right.
And even if you're in Sinai, you do hold from a hekesh, right?
Yeah, but we don't make a hekish. This is not about a hekish.
That is a hekesh.
No, it's not a
It's
hekish.
sneaker. It's right next to it.
It's semichus. It's not
Okay.
a hekish.
It's
Nowhere
almost,
in
it's almost
nowhere
like
in
a hekesh.
Shas, nowhere in Shas does it say it's a hekish between there and there. Because, Daddy, let me ask you this: you want to
Right.
tell me that this week's parsha we had Tisisa and give me the Machzah Shekel? What does the Machzah Shekel have to do with the eagle?
It's mechaper on the eagle.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
maybe it is, maybe it is.
One of the
But
reasons.
right, but my point I'm saying is you have to derive it. It's not a hekish, it's a derivative. It's a derivative. Anyways, I'm probably going to talk about this on this week's parsha, because here's the real question. Why is the Mishkan get the laws and we learn out Shabbos from the Mishkan? Why don't we simply say Shabbos is mentioned in the Aseret Sadipris? Zocha b'Shabbat.
Yeah, the Meleches Machshavas is what you learn from the Mishkan.
Right.
That you need a Machshava. If you don't have a Machshava, you're not Chayav.
Very good, Daddy. But don't we need the Mishkan to learn the Lamed Tes Malachas?
Both. You learn the Lametes Melochas and the fact that those Melochas were done with knowledge, with Machshava, so that it applies to Shabbos too.
It applies to Shabbos too. Exactly, that's what I'm saying. But the question is, why did we learn it from Mishkan and not in Shabbos? Let's learn the halachas in Shabbos and derive Mishkan from Shabbos. This is what I can't do.
Go talk to God.
So now we have to come up with an answer. And that's what we're going to try to do this week. Anyways, here we go. Chaninois, the Chagigahs. Michtav Kasiv, and it's Chag, it says Chag all the time. It mentions Chagoisem Chag all the time. Like Tzaricha. We don't think it's popular Abaya. As a Papa said to Abaya, Mimai Dahai Chagoisem Oisai Chag Lashem Zivicha. How do you know it means slaughtering a Chagigah offering? It seems maybe it means simply celebrate the Yontif, sing a lot, dance, be Chassidish.
Have a party.
And Moshe told Parai that we got to go into the midbar because Hashem wants us to party with him in the wilderness, in the midbar. Maybe it means simply partying, celebrating the young.
Question mark.
With that, maybe it means to just party in the midbar. Maybe you're right. It's just
no, you didn't say it right. It should have been no. Is Hochanami the Chagigah? Do you mean to say that it means just having a party? Of course not. It means that you have to bring a korban.
And if you want to say that's exactly the case.
But he himself asked it in terms of a...
But the pasuk says, and not only insult over injury, Parai, you're going to supply the animals for the sacrifice. Parai must have been seeing red at this point. So you see,
we're talking about sacrifices.
So therefore, you clearly, by asking Parai to supply the sacrifices, we're dealing with sacrifices. Says the Gemara, no. Says the Gemara, no. Dilma hachi kamar achmana. Ichlu b'shisu v'chaygu chagakami. Eat and drink and celebrate a yontif before me. And my parent, you're going to supply, you're going to call ditmas, and you're going to pay the ditmas bill.
Yeah,
that's it.
The food.
So something Gemara loy sakadat. Tiksiv v'lo yolin chelev chagei ad boiker. Nor may the fat of my festival remain overnight until morning. This is the issur of lina, not to leave things overnight. And if you do, you have to burn it. But if you mean it just means to celebrate the yontif, is there any fats when you celebrate? No, Elamaya must mean that you celebrated by bringing an offering on which there were fats, and therefore take care of the fats before the next morning. Doesn't work now. The fats of any voluntary offerings that happen to be brought at the time of the yontif should not remain over time. Who said that overnight? Who said it means Chagigah? Elameyata says the Gemara, Bob is man chagu. The lo yolin. Can the pasuk mean that only fat that's brought during a yontif is not left overnight? But the rest of the year, any carbon that's brought could remain overnight. That's not true. The pasuk clearly says, Kol halayla arabaykiksiv, all night until the morning. This has to do with every carbon that's brought. We don't linas halayla. There's an issue of linas halayla. 10b2. Elamai, that the Torah went out of its way to have a specific pasuk by the yontif of Chag. It must be talking about the fats, which means that you offered, that Chag means
Chagigah,
an offering, a Chagigah. That's the Gemara now. Dilma, I would have said that a whole year, sacrificial parts have to be burned by morning. It's only a mitzvah aseh, a positive command. What's the positive command? Kol halayla ad habayka, all night until the morning. Kasav rachmana haylalav. So therefore, the Torah wrote something else to strengthen it, to say the fats of my festivals not to be left over till morning, to create a negative command in that wealth. So in other words, you got both an aseh to get rid of it overnight, and a lois aseh, don't leave it open till the morning. Something about lalav. But I got another pasuk for that. V'lo yolin and mina bosa shetisbar be'erev b'yom rishon b'labayke.
You already have a love.
Any of the person you slaughter on the afternoon before the first day remain overnight until the morning. I already have a loy. I already have a lav. So says the Gemara, maybe David's just piling on. He's creating a positive commandment to get rid of it at night, and two lavim not to get it, not to leave it over. So says the Gemara.
What does that mean? You have two lavim. That means you would get two malkas?
That's a good question. That's a good question because it's a helamachas. If it's a helamachas, it's simultaneous. You might only get one malchus, but you would have to bring two chatases.
Two chatas.
Ela asya midbar. I mean, again, off the top of my head, Daddy. Don't hold me to that.
That's possible, yeah.
Ela asya midbar. But rather, we learn it out from the Gzeres Shava of the word wilderness and wilderness. Moshe told Paroi, and they will celebrate after me in the midbar. And it says over there in Amos, in the Novi Amos, Hazavok, and I'm stressing that the second pasuk is the Gemara's pasuk in the Novi. Did you bring unto me offerings and meal offerings? In other words, the Novi over there in Amos is mashma what? That they did not bring any kabbanis in the midbar. So just like over here, it's talking about zabachim in that, did you bring me any offerings in the midbar? So therefore, before the Chagali Midbar is definitely talking about offerings. Says the Gemara, Umay kahadria teluyim b'sara. So what does it mean that like a mountain suspended by air? It seems to be firmly established by a Gezerah Shava.
Yeah.
Says the Gemara, Divrei Torah min Divrei Kabbalah lo yalfina. It's a Gezerah Shava from a pasuk in the Torah that Moshe said to Parai to a Nevi'ist of Amos. Usually we do not compare a Navi back to the Torah. To use a Navi to explain the Torah. We might use the Torah to explain a Navi, but to use the Navi to explain the Torah, that's a little far-fetched. That's a mountain hanging by a ear. And again, that's an Oikaharim. Mi'ilois, that means the halachas of using kodesh, sanctified stuff for mundane purposes. What it called again, like a mountain, like a mountain hanging by a thread, by a hair. Say to but what are you talking about? It's written about Me'ila all over the place. This is what we learned regarding. Now, this is an interesting case. A guy hires a shliach, an agent, to buy something of chulin, mundane, and by accident he gives him money that was consecrated for the Beis Hamikdash. Okay, he gave him money that he put aside to give to the shul. In this case, the Beis Hamikdash. Hashliach shaz shlichusay. The shliach goes and faithfully carries out his shlichus and purchases exactly what the Baal Abayis wanted. Baal Abayis small. The Baal Abayis, unfortunately, by accident, was Moil Behegdish. He used holy money to buy mundane stuff. 10b3.
Even though he didn't buy it.
Even though he didn't buy it, but shliach shel adam k'maisai. An agent of a person is like himself. However, having now just said that, let's throw a monkey wrench into the whole picture. How shliach was. But if the shliach is not faithful, he told him to go buy him a set of dishes. He went ahead and bought a set of glasses. So now the shliach did not use the money appropriately, which means that he's no longer did not act as a correct agent for the Baal, which means he was on his own, misappropriating the Baal Abayis' money, which the Baal Abayis had misappropriated erroneously, thinking it was clear money, and in fact it was consecrated money. In that case, the agent is chayiv because he's not no longer can you say shliach shel adam k'maisai. Why is the shliach? Why is it that if he fulfills faithfully, his shlichus, why is the owner? Why is the balabas the guilty party? This person did the sin, the one who actually purchased the stuff with the sacred money did the aveira. The balabais didn't do an aveira. He made the error of giving the money to the shliach. But at the end of the day, the shliach said, you're going to tell me what kind of question is this? Shliach shel adam k'maisai. But the answer is, ain't shliach lidvar aveira. There's no agency for an aveira. You can't pass it on to your shliach to do an aveira for you, even if it's inadvertent. Says the Gemara, Hainu, and the fact that this rule overrides that rule, Ein Shliach L'Dvar Aveira, Hainu Ka'arona Natuli B'Shara. That's one of those rules of a mountain suspended by air. And that's why, Daddy, I keep saying that the mountain, the muscle to a mountain has to be Oikahorim, because you got to use your thumb to come to all these decisions, because they ain't straight. Amarava, my kushya, Dilmashani Mi'ila, maybe Shimil is different. The Alfino Chait Mitruma, because you got a Gezerah Shava between the words sin from Truma, which is right next to Mi'ila, the topic of Mi'ila. That's why it is. And you don't say ain't shliach l'dvar aveira ella, because just like a shliach could separate truma for you, a shliach could also go ahead and be ma'al for you. Ella marava like tzricha ella kedetanya. It's only what we learned in the following brisa, where somebody inadvertently gave his shliach holy money to spend in the market, and niska balabayis v'loy niska shliach. And before the shliach gets to the marketplace, the owner remembers that he gave him the wrong money, and the money that he's carrying with that he gave over to the shliach is holy. but the agent did not remember, was not aware that the money was consecrated. He shut off his phone. So the guy was trying to desperately call him on his cell phone and send him WhatsApps, but he had it off. See, like my father likes to do when he goes to shul, he leaves the phone at home. So he becomes unreachable. Shliach Moal. In that case, the Shliach is the one who's Moal.
I was wondering about one thing. If he remembers that it was Kodesh money, why didn't he redeem that money on some other money and say, the money I have in my house should be Kodesh instead of the other, so that the Shliach will not do the Avera?
So the answer is, so Daddy, it's a great question, and I didn't think about it. But the answer that comes to my head is a Gemara in the Bubbas. Do you remember there is a question whether a person has to have the money in his house or it's out in the bank and he's going to go get it? I don't remember the situation. Does this ring a bell? Does this ring a bell slightly?
Yeah. You have to
have it the end. You can't have it in the bank. So this would be a case of where he didn't have any other cash in the house. The cash is in the bank. That would have to be the answer. I don't remember totally what the case is, but that's what falls into my head. When you
otherwise, that's what he could have done.
That's what he could have done. But if I remember correctly, you cannot switch over unless the money is there, right? You remember this vaguely, right? Something like this. I don't have it clear because we're not in the sugya, but I seem to remember that would have to be the explanation. Because otherwise, you're exactly right. Take advantage and just switch the money. Anyway, so the answer over here is Shliach Ma'al, that the agent is guilty of Mila because he's no longer an agent. Because the guy said, oops, you're no longer an agent. He just thought the agent didn't get the poor mention. Shliach, so Frank the Gemara, Shliach Anya, my COVID. Now, what did the poor agent do in this case? That he
didn't know anything about it.
He didn't know anything about it. He left. He was doing like you rabbi said. Leave your cell phone home. Don't always be married to your cell phone. This is one of those counterintuitive halachas, like a mountain suspended by your hair. Amar Rav Ashi, my kusha. What's the kasha? Perhaps it's just like any case of a person who inadvertently removes consecrated coins from the sacred domain to a secular domain. That's just the case. That's what it is. The one who removes it is the one that's vile. That's all.
Because the whole meila is always b'shoigeg, not b'mezid.
It's always b'shoigeg, and it's always the one who does the actual action.
Right.
In order to be mud, you have to be mud. You have to do an action. Ella amaravashi like tzuricha ella keditznan. It's only what we had to say in the Mishnah, in the Mishnayis Meila. It goes like this: No tal even oikairish shalagdish. If he took a stone or a beam from the gizbar, the treasury of the Beis Hamikdash, harei zeh loy moal. He still hasn't been moal yet, right? And the Gemara is going to explain why. Nosna lechaveiroi. If he gives it to his chaver, he gives it over to a third party. Who moal b'chaveiroi loy moal. He is guilty of meila, and his fellow then is not guilty of meila. By him having taken the beam out and then transferring it out from his hand to his friend, that transfer created a meila. Once you moil, what happens? The kedusha goes away. Ein meila acha meila. There is no meila acha meila by kedusha's domim, by monetary sanctity. Only by kedusha's aguf. The kedusha never falls off. By kedusha's domim, once you moil, that's it. It's free and clear.
Right.
So the person who picked up the beam out of the treasury, he didn't do anything with it yet. All he did was take it out of the treasury. That itself is not meila. a transaction of giving it over to, so Reuven takes it out of the thing, hands it over to Shimon. Now it was Meila. Shimon then hands it off to Levi, no problem. Okay? 10b4. Mechti, let's see the situation here. Mishkal Shakla, he has taken the stone or beam in either case. Mali Chaveroi. What's the difference if he takes it himself or his friend takes it? At the end of the day, when he picked it up and carried it out of the Beis Hamikdash, that was an act of transition. He transitioned from the Beis Hamikdash.
He was kind of.
So therefore, that's like a mountain suspended by hair. So says the Gemara, no. My kusha dilma kiddushmul. It's like Shmuel. The Shmuel, Hocha, the Mishnah, and now we're on Yud Aleph, Tamid Aleph, which is today's daf, and we're just going to go a little bit there. We'll go a little bit down the Amid. Begizbar Hamusaris like Abnei Binyan and Askina. We're referring to the Gabbai Tzedakah of the Beis Hamikdash, to whom building stones have been entrusted. And where even they rest prior to his appropriating them, it's like in his rishus, since it's under his auspices, even if he carries it out of the Beis Hamikdash to his house, he still hasn't been moyal, because it remains still under his watchful eye. Just like in the Beis Hamikdash was under his responsibility, it's still under his responsibility. That his achrayus hasn't changed. The moment he shifts it and gives it away to somebody else, the achrayus fell off. Now you're moyal. So something Gemara Elami Sefer. Let's go to the end of the same Mishnah, which says, if instead of giving the object away, the Gabbai builds it into his own house, he's not loyal even if he puts it into his own house, unless he dwells underneath the value of a pruta's word. He dwells underneath for 2-3 minutes. Mechti, Shanuya Shanir. By building it into his house, he's changed it. He's obviously used it for building purposes, not for the Beis Hamikdash. Mali dar, mali loy dar. That's like a mountain suspended by hair. Pray to Gemara, my kasha. Now, Dilma Kidirav. Domarav. It's only, this mission is only talking about where he placed it over an opening in the roof, but he didn't knock it down into the structure.
He didn't cement
it down. Ain't da idar it. So if you dwell under it, you're getting a pruta's worth of anah from that covering. That's meila. Loy dar be loy. Because at the end of the day, all you did was place it down.
Door is lavdafka. Let's say if he put the beam over the hole to protect it from the rain, that's the room.
Same thing.
That's the same thing.
Right.
Any kind of manure that he had.
And if he had done it for storage, I was going to say storage.
Just use this door as an example.
Right, but door is right. But for the purposes of this, so says the Gemara, like we said before, that it is the ruling when the sender, the balabas became aware that it was holy money, and the agent is the one that's guilty of me'ilah because he didn't know that it was holy money. And then for your question, that this rule is logical, because it's no different than any ordinary case where somebody inadvertently B'shoigeg takes money out of holy to chulin. In that case, when it was inadvertently taken out, he was somewhat aware that there were sacred coins in his possession. He didn't realize that those were the ones that were it. He should have scrutinized it more. How come here? The shliach had no shot of knowing anything. He was just an agent.
So there's no.
This is one of those rules, like a mountain hanging by air. Mikra muet va'alochis meruba.
By the way, I don't see Jeff on the. How is he?
He's still not feeling well. He's still has a very, very bad cold.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. If you can, text him and just ask him how he's doing. What do you call it? I texted with him Friday, and Jerry was in touch with him. He's just very weak. So, Mikra Mu'et Va'alochis Meruba. There are few spiritual references, but there are numerous halachis. Tana we learned, and we're going to stop in about a minute. Negoyim v'ahalois mikra mu'et v'halachis merubas. The laws regarding tsaras, negoyim of tsaras, and oilois, the rules of tumas oil, roof tuma, with a dead body underneath the roof. All those, there's few spiritual references, but many laws. Negoyim mikra mu'et, negoyim mikra meruba. What are you talking about? We have tazriya mitzayra. The whole passage is about the goyim. Amar Papa Chikama Negoyim Mikra. In fact, flip it. Negoyim Mikra Meruba. In fact, there are two parshas Tazriya Mitzayah discussing the goyim. And in reality, there are very few halachas, which there are. They're really action. The kohen checks, bada bing, bada boom, and that's it. Oil Mikra Mu'at. In fact, oil has very few psukim. It's a pasuk in Chukas. The Zais HaTorah Adam Ki Amos Ba'oil. That's it. Because Ba'oil oil, it's really one pasuk. So Mikra Mu'et, Ba'alochis Meruba. But we spend a lot of time in Shas talking about the parameters of Tumas oil. Mine Afkaminu, who cares? It's an interesting question, this Mine Afkaminu. Now we start asking Mine Afkaminu. So the truth of the matter is that theoretically you could have asked us about this whole Gemara that we've been doing. But okay, my nafkamina, that if you were in any doubt concerning a matter of negoyim law,
because today there's no Beis Hamikdash, so all these halachas don't apply.
Maybe.
That's why the Gemara says my nafkamina.
I think there's one other one, and this one, because this is a real big chiddush we're about to come to. If you have any questions with regard to Negoyim, Ayin Bikroy 11a2. Look in the Torah for the relevant psukim. If you got a problem with oil law, Ayin B'masnisin, look in the Mishnah. Now, the reason this is a chiddush is we almost never say you look directly in the Torah and paskin directly from the Torah. Because the Torah clearly, like I began, is Torah Shebiksav is only broadly classified. Honor your father and your mother, but it doesn't say what honor is. Fear your mother and your father, but it doesn't say what fear is. You should keep the Shabbos, but it doesn't say how you're supposed to keep the Shabbos. But it doesn't tell you what a toitafais is. Al mezuzah is on the doorposts of your house. What it goes on the doors of your house, right? So all of these obviously came with an oral translation of which we're still working our way through. So this is a huge chiddush to begin with. Let's just finish up towards the bottom. There are two dots at the bottom of the Yomit, so we'll be halfway done with today's dot. Dinan, and I want to do it in the next 3 minutes, so no questions. Here we go. Dinan, that means monetary law, has real support, which means that it's supported by the Torah, but it's not explicit, right? The Gemara Michtav Kesiva. What are you talking about? The rules of monetary law are very explicit in the Torah. Like Tzaricha Elok the Rebbe, the Tanya Rebbe Ayman Nefesh Tachas Nefesh Mamay, that a reward for a life is Mamay. This case over here is a case, two guys fighting, and accidentally they kill a woman. Right? One Mandama says Yechayiv Misa. The other Rebbe says no, because you didn't intend to kill this woman. Instead, you have to give her value. You shots up her value, and you have to pay it off. How do we know, by the way, that money? The Vilna Gaon's famous word, ayin tachas ayin, an eye for an eye. Ayin mitachas means under. Under the letter ayin is pay. Under the letter yud is chaf. Under the letter nun is pay. It spells kesef.
Right.
Ayin, tachas the ayin, you'll find the word kesef. The Vilna Gaon, I believe. I have it written down on the side of my Gemara. This is Vilna Gaon.
The Gemara started a different story when an Apikoros went to the Sefer Torah, I think, of Ezra, and he removed the letter Ayin, and his eyes fell off.
And his eyes fell out.
Ayin.
Yeah, Gemara's going to bring that down. I don't know if it brings it here. I think it brings it in another Gemara.
Yeah.
So, anyways, nefesh tachas nefesh momai. Nefesh mamish, or maybe it means alive. Take him, the murderer is executed. Neman nesina lamata. It says giving below under the previous. The previous case was a woman who was pregnant that by accident was kicked in the stomach and she got a miscarriage. Over there it says clearly you got to give money. You got to cover the miscarriage. Because even though the body inside the mother after 40 days is considered a human being, it is definitely considered alive. Nonetheless, since it's not mechuyev b'mitzvahs until it comes out, it's not considered murder. Anyways, never in the scene of avoiders, the sacrificial service has real support. What are you talking about? The entire Sefer Vayikra is about what? Sacrifices. So what do you mean? It's clearly written in the Torah. About carrying the dam. You remember very quickly there are 4 steps to the avodah. Shchita, Kabbalah, that means accepting the blood. Holicha, carrying the blood. And Zerika, spritzing the blood. The thing about carrying the blood is that it's not ma'akif. What do I mean by that? If you happen to have slaughtered the animal right next to the mizbeach, where right after you makabel the dam, you can simply transfer it straight to the mizbeach. There's no din halicha. Halicha is only necessary if it's done further away. So I might think halicha doesn't have the same laws as shchita, kabbalah, and zerika. Says the Gemara, the Tanya v'ikriva, you shall bring the blood. Zed kabbalah sadam. That means receiving the blood in a klei asharis, a sacred vessel. Now the pasuk denoted kabbalah with the lashon of what?
Ikriva, which is
the v'hikriv ha'koyin esakol v'hikter hamizbeach. He shall bring it all and cause it to go up and smoke on the mizbeach. This is bringing the limbs of the sacrifice to the ramp of the mizbeach. So we said bringing it signifies conveying something to the Beis Hamikdash. Yet the Torah uses the same thing with regard to Kabbalah receiving the blood. It teaches us that the rules of halacha are not excluded from the rules of Kabbalah. So just like by Kabbalah, if the blood would fall on the floor when you were receiving the blood from the animal, the whole thing would be no good. Same thing with halicha. If the blood would fall on the floor, you can't scoop it up and put it back into the keli. One more, tahara. The rules of tahara have spiritual support. Now on 11,
mefagel the korban.
Mefagel, if your mind goes in the wrong place. 11A3, and this is where we're stopping. By Timaeus on the bottom. By Arias on the bottom. Michtav Kesivan. What are you talking about? Tahara is written explicitly in the Torah. Like Tzaricha Elul Shir Mikvah, for the Shir, the minimum Shir of 40 saw for a mikvah. The like Kesiva, it's not written anywhere. Titania Baruch says Basari Bamayim. What is Bamayim in the water? Bamayim B'mei Mikvah, gathered water, not Mayim Shuhuvim, not water that you schlepped from the lake. Okay, that's why a pool becomes a good mikvah, because it receives the water directly from the rain. Over time, it's got rainwater in there. As kol b'sarai, all is flesh, mayim shel gufay oilabehed, a water enough for his whole body to be covered in one time. V'kamehin, how much is this? Ama al ama b'rum shleishes ama. One amma at the height of 3 amas, 3 cubic amas of water. The shiru chachamim, and the chachamim figured out, may mikvah b'am sa. 1 by 1 by 3 equals 40 sa of water. We're not getting into the math. this is not the place to get into the math. Plenty other places in shots, they work it out.
The Moshe Rabbeinu wouldn't fit in such a mikveh.
No, he would not. He'd have to scrunch up.
And I'm as high.
Yeah, exactly right.
We need a bigger one.
In Tumais, the laws of contamination have real spiritual support. Michtav Kesavim, what are you talking about? It's written explicit, and here we go. We need it to teach us the laws of a lentil-sized piece of a sheretz that it too conveys tumah contamination. Deloy Kesivi, something which is not written in the Torah straight out. The Tanya Bohem. With regard to Shrotzim, it says Bohem. It says Bohem. Ela Tameim Lachem B'chol Sheretz Kol Nageya Bohem B'Moisam Yitmar Arav Hey. The fifth on the side in the Torah Ara Sholem. Yachav Kulon, I might thought only if one touches them in their completed state. Bahem, Talmud Loima Mayhem, from them. Yachav b'miktzas, and I might have thought at least even a minute part of the sheretz. Talmud Loima Bohem, with them. Okay, so how do you reconcile the two lashonos of Bohem and Mayhem? And the Gemara, until he touches a part of the carcass that is equivalent to the whole. The Chachamim says it's the size of a lentil when it comes to shiratzim. Because the chaymet, this is one of the creepy, it's like a snail, a type of snail. It's the size of a lentil at the beginning of its existence. Rabbi Yehuda, Kizinav halata, like the tail of a lizard. The tail of a lizard, which we have in Florida a lot, right? You take a look at those tails, that's the size.
If you grab the tail of a lizard, it comes right off.
It really does?
The lizard, that's one of the protection of the lizard. In order to escape, he drops his tail comes off, and he runs away, and it goes back again. Yeah.
Wow, didn't know that. Very good. Okay, we are up to the bottom over here. You had Aleph of a base. We're almost at the end of the Mishnah is coming up on the other side. If you want to take 2 minutes here, we can get to the new parak. So let's just quickly do that. Arayas, illegal relationships have real support. Michtav Kesivim, what are you talking about? Support. They're actually written in Pashas Achrimais Kedoshim. Ella nitzach loy nitzacha Ella, and now we're on Yud Aleph on the days. Lebite me'anusasai, with his daughter, the prohibition of incest with his daughter, who was the offspring of a rape victim. Okay, an out of wedlock daughter. The loy kasiva, which is not written expressed in the Torah. The amarava amali Rabbi Yitzchak bar Abdimi asya heina asya zimo. All these words are mentioned over there by Arayas. Heina, that it's forbidden for a father to cohabit with his out of wedlock daughter, is derived from a gezerah shavar from the word zima. So it's the Gemara, hein, gufi Torah. Hanein, only these last three halachis in the Mishnah, these are the gufei Torah. Hanach lai, all the other laws are not, even because they're less explicit in the Torah, are not fundamentals of the Torah. Elaima, hein ve'hein, gufei Torah. All of them are fundamentals of the Torah. Hadan Allah kol chayavim, Hadan Allah kol chayavim, Hadan Allah kol chayavim. We should turn to you kol chayavim. We should turn to you kol chayavim. Should to you kol chayavim. Great. Tomorrow morning.